Hi, everybody. Hi. I see a lot of familiar faces, so thanks to all of you for coming out on this really lovely evening in February. Someone did point out to me that I seem to order up this weather every time we have one of these, so that is not my intention, but thank you for coming out anyway. So before we get started, I wanted to say a thank you, as always, to 46, the restaurant that we are in, which hosts us every month, except for the 2 times a year that we are down at Johnson & Wales, which is I was also just asked about. And the next one is going to be in April. So if you're on our mailing list, which everybody should be now, you'll hear about that coming up soon. But we have another program here in March 1st. So before we get started, I just want to say that, as most of you know, the UNC Nutrition Research Institute is on the North Carolina Research Campus. So there are other universities besides UNC that we share our campus with. And the biggest partner on the campus, university-wise, is the University North Carolina State University. Sorry, the other one's ingrained in my brain. And I'm really pleased that this evening we have the director of their Plants for Human Health Institute as your speaker. So to introduce her, please welcome Carol Cheatham, Dr. Carol Cheatham, who is with the UNC Nutrition Research Institute. Hi.
So I have the distinct pleasure tonight of introducing my colleague and friend, Dr. Lila. Dr. Lila got her Ph.D. at the University of Wisconsin and has made quite a career for herself. Her research focuses on the bioactive compounds found in fruits and vegetables, mostly berries. So if any of you know me from the berry study, Marianne and I worked together on that study. She was in charge of the berries and I was in charge of the humans. So her research is unique in that most people that do this type of research look for the bioactives so that they can turn them into a pill that people can take. But Marianne, like I, believe that the whole food is the way to go. So what she's doing is looking at why their bioactive mechanisms are protective and how we can determine what foods and what amounts you need to protect yourself. So Dr. Lila taught me that the reason that the foods have certain colors, like the berries have a compound called anthocyanin, and that's what makes it the dark blue, like the blueberry color. She taught me that those colors are there to protect the fruit from the sun. So that's why they have protective factors, because they're literally there to protect the fruit from getting quote-unquote cancer. So it doesn't say it in your flyer, but I'm pretty sure she's most proud of the work she's done trying to teach me all this berry stuff, because it's been the hardest thing she's done in years. So she has active projects in Egypt, Central Asia, Oceania, Mexico, and Sub-Saharan Africa. She's vice president of the Global Institute for Bioexploration. And in 1999, she was awarded a Fulbright Senior Scholarship to do research in New Zealand. And she travels to New Zealand once a year and even took me with her. She was just telling me that she just got back last month, so she's been there recently. She also was on this campus, had the honor of being, in 2010, the first David H. Murdoch Distinguished Professor. And you may have seen her around that same time on Dr. Oz. So join me in welcoming Dr. Marianne Lila.
Hey.
This is the mic. You're talking into that.
I know. Okay, there we go.
Is that better?
Okay, now you can hear me. So, Hippocrates of Kos, about 300 BC, was the first guy to realize and to say that diseases were caused by something other than curses from the gods or, natural disasters. He was the first to realize there was a reason for diseases. And he was the first guy to tell doctors that they had to keep records or notes, patient logs, to follow how a disease was progressing. Before that, it was just, willy-nilly. It was haphazard. And he, about 300 BC, said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So he was acknowledging the fact that our foods actually contain ingredients in them, active compounds within them, that are able to counteract chronic human diseases. He acknowledged that. Now, if this is true, if food is our medicine, and we can get tremendous diversity of active compounds out of our food, why aren't we all healthy? Because we all eat, right? Why is that? And I wanted to go through some reasons things have changed a lot for humans over the centuries, and how our food has changed a bit. Not to say our food is bad now, it's the last thing I want to say, but how it has changed and some things to look out for as you're deciding how to eat now yourself in your own homes and when you're out. Look at how the world is today. We're looking at obesity and the percentage of the population, adults or older than 15 anyway, with a body mass index greater than 30. It's just looking at different countries. So look who's the tubbiest. USA, right? And it tends to be that the worst countries for obesity, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, all these diseases that are related to eating the wrong way, tend to be countries that are upper class countries, countries that are not developing countries, but countries that are well-developed countries and industrialized countries. So we've got a problem, and we need to know how to fix that. If you look just another kind of example, percentage of adult females, adults who are defined as obese, and you can see, again, we're not doing so good in the United States. We're not doing so good in Northern Africa, Southern Africa. This percentage is increasing, and even, and yes, we have much less famine and disasters than we did in years past, but this has also led to a situation where kind of food has gone the opposite direction from being a medicine to being something that we're actually using. More people are dying from sugar than from gunpowder these days. So this is what we need. We need to eat the correct foods, and we need to exercise. These things go together, and I'll show some evidence for this later on, is how food and what you eat really is absorbed better in your body, and it does more good for you when you actually have movement in your lifestyle as well. So we need to eat well, we need to exercise. What do we do instead? We eat junk food and we are couch potatoes. That's how it is. That's how we are. And this is making a major problem in our health as a nation. So Hippocrates said if we could give every individual the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too little, but not too much, we would have found the safest way to health. And that, I truly believe this. Carol mentioned New Zealand. This is my front yard in New Zealand. How do you like it? Yeah, I miss it so bad. The house is horrible. The house is, but the view is very nice. Yeah, the little tiny white sheep, I just love it. Anyway, so what are some of the reasons we have this problem now? We used to live on wild foods. I mean, people would spend most of their day hunting and gathering to get foods to eat. That consumed most of an individual person's day. Now we go in and out of food line, we're done. Okay, so we went from wild foods to modern cropping and farming. Lots of food, availability, nothing wrong with that. That's tremendous, that's great. But we've changed our lifestyle quite a bit as a result. And we've bred for higher yields in foods. And we went from living off the land, so a lot of work, a lot of toil, the farm lifestyle, the hunter lifestyle, to kind of living for fast food. So we've changed in those ways. I work a lot with wild foods. And the reason I do that is because plants, in particular plants, they grow and they are stuck in the ground. They can't move. So when disasters or stresses come their way, they have to react by making phytochemicals, nutritive and extra nutritional phytoactive compounds inside them to fend off the environment. UV light, cold snaps, poor soil fertility, insects, pathogens. So a plant will build up these active compounds, and there'll be chock-a-block full of these active compounds that help the plant. But these are the same compounds that when you eat the plant, they will, or put it on your skin, some topical applications, they'll interact with human therapeutic targets to ward off chronic disease or to just improve your metabolism. So plants have that ability, and they have it more than any place else in the wild, where they are fending off, they're in the harsh excesses of living on the fringe of survival, and they've got to be strong. So they have the most intense phytoactive compounds when they're in the wild. So I believe a lot in wild foods, which we can't all eat. We can't. But can anybody tell me what this is? This is actually a dish in Alaska. I work, one of my projects is in Alaska. And I don't know what the meat is, so I can't say. And there's some broccoli in there, but what else? Fiddlehead ferns, right. So a big part of the native Alaskan diet, part of their traditional ecological knowledge, fiddlehead ferns. This is also a plate of berries from Alaska. And you may or may not recognize them. These little guys are, these are salmon berries, as are these salmon berries. So they're a relative of raspberry. They're gorgeous, aren't they? And they really taste good, too. Bog blueberries are in there, bog blueberries, which are related to cultivated blueberries, but they grow in the tundra. And then crowberries, which isn't a very attractive name, but that's these guys, crowberries. Also called mossberries. It depends on where you are in Alaska. So they're beautiful. It is so interesting because in Alaska, a lot of these places in Alaska, especially above the tree line in the tundra, there's almost nothing that they eat that grows in the ground. Everything's from the sea, and yeah, they'll have the caribou that they'll also hunt for, but very few plants that grow in the ground that they actually eat naturally. Everything is shipped in from the lower 48, especially for the Alaska natives, but the berries are a big deal because they just grow all over the tundra, and they're splendiferous like this. Wild, more packed with phytoactive compounds and all berries are good. I recommend them religiously, eat them as much as you can, but these just have just so much more in them just because they're wild, and they grow like that. Now, and they're beautiful, right? So this is also beautiful. It's a produce aisle. Beautiful. Nothing wrong with a produce aisle. This is where you should be doing most of your shopping. But there is a big difference in how those foods got in the produce aisle compared to the wild ones that I just showed you. Like this is an intensively cultivated strawberry plantation in California. And because the plants are cultivated, there's a lot of inputs to cultivation. I mean, they have to cultivate, fertilize. A lot of spraying goes on because they're intense and they're in a really dense situation. So they, if one pathogen starts to colonize the leaves of the plants, it's really going to spread. So there's a lot of inputs that go into this, and they usually have to be harvested and not quite ripe because they're going to have to make it from California to other parts of the United States and beyond. So it's different. So we went from wild foods to modern cropping. We've changed the reasons that we grow plants or the ways that we grow plants. We tend to breed plants now so that they're going to be easier to harvest. They're going to be easier to ship. They're going to have a longer shelf life in the grocery store. All those things are important. But every time you breed for something, or maybe for disease resistance or, ability to withstand cold temperatures. Every time you breed for something, you breed away from the phytoactive compounds that are in the plant in the wild. So every time we take a wild plant and cultivate it and have the cultivated plant into the grocery stores after hundreds of years, it's changed in its compounds. So we've bred for high yields, we've bred for shipping qualities, because we're distributing worldwide now. Customers want things sweet, and customers demand perfection. You can't have a blemish on your apple. You can't have anything wrong, and so they breed for that, and you lose a lot in that, and also for farmers' efficiency. Okay, so it means we're reliant on higher inputs, and the biggest input, I would say, is spraying, and everybody's worried about spraying, too much spraying on things, and berries tend to be one of the ones that tend to get a lot of spraying. Depletion of the nutrients, and then depleting or diluted phytoactive compounds. Another example, this is the Russet Burbank potato. So this is the most common potato. This is the one that McDonald's makes the fries out of. It's 70% of all the potatoes in North America are Russet Burbank potatoes. Because it's got a nice thin skin, it's easy to peel, you can count on it, it's going to be all uniform inside, everything's great. In contrast that, and I went to visit in Lima, Peru, the International Potato Center, the diversity of potatoes that are grown in the wild. And all different colors, the insides, the flesh are all different colors. They're not necessarily going to be so easy or so reliable. Like this one here, this is called the mother-in-law's potato. Why? Because traditionally the Indians in Peru would give the prospective daughter-in-law the potato, and she had to peel the whole thing in one strip without breaking it. It would make her very nervous, and there'd be a lot of tears. No, I don't know, mother-in-law's tears, but still. So full of nutrients that we've really basically lost in our cultivated potato for sacrifice. Yes, Carol mentioned blueberries, and this is one that has a huge reputation. Most people recognize it as a functional food, a food that's good for your health, the little blue pill, if you will. And it's well known for active components, for pigments and anti-cancer effects and cardioprotective effects and a lot of other things that we're doing research on now, cognitive and motor function. And it's almost amazing that this berry can have so many different activities. A little bit on urinary tract infection related. It's a close relative to the cranberry. Heart, eyes, cancer. It's really good for increasing satiety. So eating berries increases the length of time between meals that you feel like eating, the sensation of being full. So berries actually are known for decreasing weight gain, cognitive abilities, neuroprotection, and then more recently a lot with motor function in athletes. Now, contrast, this is a cultivated blueberry plantation in Oregon. Gorgeous. It's gorgeous. I love it. It's very beautiful, but it's cultivated. So these plants, and by the way, cultivated blueberries are only about 100 years old. Did you know that? There's only like 2 commercially important fruits that are native North American fruits. Do you know? Cranberries and blueberries. They're native North American fruits. I mean, everybody says, as American as apple pie, but apples came from Kazakhstan and changed a lot by the time they got here. But blueberries, they're ours. Cranberries are ours. But blueberries are wild. And about 100 years ago in New Jersey, a little over 100 years ago, the wild blueberries were selected and bred and selected in greenhouse for a while until they finally found a form that could survive in cultivation, and they could produce as in a bush format, because wild blueberries tend to be low growing, and that's the cultivated blueberry that is now all over the place today. So these cultivated blueberries, which have a lot of inputs, a lot of spray, a lot of cultivation, a lot of fertilization, you have to take awfully good care of blueberries to have a viable crop, because there's so many things that want to destroy it. It used to be only in North America, only in a very narrow part of North America, and they're gorgeous. But now they're in 38 different states. Used to just be in one very narrow part of Canada and the United States, but now they're in 38 different states, and, you know, including North Carolina. Good crop in North Carolina. But not only that, they're all over the place in the world now. They have been imported. Growing blueberries is imported. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I used to go on international trips, I'd go down to New Zealand. Yeah, I've been going there a long time. And I would bring sweetened dried cranberries and sweetened dried blueberries, craisins and blueberries. And people would not know what these fruits were. They were not familiar. Then we had the whole thing with urinary tract infection and cranberry juice and being able to counteract urinary tract infection. And now cranberry juice is all over the shelves in Australia and New Zealand. And blueberries are cultivated all over New Zealand, and they do a beautiful job of it. But they're all over the place now. Now, in the contrast in the wild, it's quite a different situation. Now, this is a cross-section of wild berries growing in Alaska, so wild berries. And what the heck is her name? Is that Katie Clarkson? Can't remember. Kelly Clarkson. Okay, what are these two? Yeah, just totally zipped out on the name. So Kelly Clarkson and wild berries, what do they have in common? What's her signature song when she was American Idol? Doesn't kill you, makes you strong. And that's exactly the case, that these berries are they're in the tundra, they're in the extremes, that's what makes them stronger, that's what makes them so chock-a-block full of good stuff. Now, Native Americans, you know, back in antiquity, they learned, it's in the Native American folklore, that they really learned about, or had it as part of their, the reverence for berries was because of how the animals went for the berries. You can see this in your own dogs. You can see your own dogs go and eat blueberries or raspberries. They'll go right to it. They'll be underfoot if you're picking berries. Native Americans would see the wolf go for berries. They would see the bear go for berries. And bears are really interesting because bears will they'll go eat berries when they're ripe. And bears have these really limber lips, okay? Really, and so they can actually, we don't have sound effects here, unfortunately, but you can hear these bears. Every time they get a really good juicy berry, they go, and they can actually go in these berry bushes and pull off just the berry, leaving the stem there. And they swallow it whole, but they love them. One bear will eat 30,000 blueberries a day. So, how do we know that? You think about it, some poor graduate student had to pick up a lot of bear poop to figure that one out. But it was well known, but not only are they just eating it, but bears are well known for going to the berries right before they hibernate, the late season berries, or after they had a fight. Like if they had a fight, two bears, and they were all full of, jagged, skin coming open and, and fur coming off, they would go straight to the berries and eat them as part of their healing properties. And bears were known as the animal that was most revered by the Native Americans because the bears seemed to know what was medicinal. Bears would specifically, with their claws, be able to dig for roots underground that had medicinal properties. So they were known for that, and they were followed by the Native Americans. And actually, bear meat, hunters in Alaska will tell you that when they harvest bear meat and they've been in the blueberry fields, the meat will be blue. Yeah. Actually not bad. Sounds terrible, but it was really pretty good. So I showed you all those cultivated berries. Wild berries are only growing in this very small geographical area, state of Maine, coastal Maine, and then some parts of Canada, okay? That is the place that they started, the place that berries started, and the place that wild blueberries are still grown. And that is an example of a wild blueberry barrens. So I showed you the nice cultivated blueberry fields, and a beautiful, a lot of inputs go to it, a lot of spraying. Wild blueberry barrens are natural. If you are a farmer and you own the land, and you chop down some trees and clear the land, the wild blueberries are the ones that'll be the species that'll start to colonize first. They'll start to cover land first, and they grow naturally. You can't even dig one up and plant it somewhere else. Doesn't work. It's a system of rhizomes underneath the soil. They don't transplant. If they're on your land, you're rich. If they're not on your land, I'm sorry, you don't get them. And they grow kind of rapidly and irregularly. An elicitation is a word that means when the environment imposes stress, all those stressors of, the weather, elicitation, that stress makes the plant stop doing primary metabolism, which is growing and developing, stops, or it slows it down, and starts building up these active compounds, these phytoactive compounds, again, that protect it, but also protect you when you eat it. So we call it stressed for success, because that's really what's going on here. This is actually a wild blueberry field in early fall, but you can see all that stress is going on. It's gorgeous, isn't it? It's beautiful. And Carol gets to go there. Well, you can go into the area coming up later on this fall, or late summer. So think about the blueberry, the vaccinium, the blueberries that you grow in the grocery, get in the grocery store, cut them open. They're mostly going to be yellow or whitish inside. A wild berry is going to have strong color inside because it's got all those phytoactive compounds. So it's the difference. It's you're breeding for, and again, I'm not saying they're bad because I buy them all the time. I mean, they're wonderful. They're great in a lot of recipes, but they're bred for uniformity, ease of harvesting, upright habits so that the machine harvester can go through. You can package them and ship them from California to New Jersey, all those things. They breed a berry to do that. They're nice and big and plump and sweet usually, whereas a wild berry is going to be smaller, not so sweet usually, more pungent, really good I think, and they're going to be chock-a-block full of the phytoactive compounds. So it's a difference. Now, when you work with wild berries, you can really tell. You're gonna get it all up and down your mouth, and you're gonna get it all over your hands. Now, when you exercise, some of you guys, I got my exercise buddy here, right? YMCA buddy. When you exercise, you have to exert some effort. I can't lift weights and just be, moving up and down with this thing, right? I've got to really have some, 12-pounders and do some reps. And the expression for that is what? Right? No pain, no gain, right? If you want to get some good out of your exercise, you've got to accept some pain. You've got to look for it. You have to live with it, and learn not to fear it. Similar expression was coined by one of our colleagues in the Wild Blueberry Association for wild blueberries. Absolutely the case. That's where you're getting the good stuff. Now, interestingly, I've been talking totally about plants and mostly about berries, but the same thing about plants, or about food changing over the generations, over the centuries, it's true for animals too. It really is. We don't think about it. It's really true for animals too. Think about chicken. Now, chicken used to be, to get a chicken from egg to broiler size, 2.2 pounds, it would take 16 weeks to get there, okay? Now with the miracles of poultry breeding, which helps the farmer, helps the economy, helps it to be more profitable, 35 days to get to 3.7 pounds from the egg to even a larger chicken, okay? Now, chicken looks nothing like the chicken used to look like. It's so big-breasted, it can't even stand up on its own. It's crated in pens. I'm not talking about free-range chickens. I'm talking about mass chicken production. Same thing is true for beef production, where they're really creating animals. We're changing the meat. We're changing, and like Julia Childs back in the 50s wrote a cookbook, and she had some chicken recipe, and in the art of French cooking, and then in current day, if you use that same recipe, you can't make the chicken do it because the chicken no longer has the flavor. It's no longer built up the oil-soluble vitamins and flavors that the chicken would have if it had grown for the 16 weeks. It's a blander flavor of chickens. That's why we use so many spices. Has anybody heard of the Dorito effect? So it's like, the author is Mark Schatzer, and it's talking about the fact that like the founder of Frito-Lay went to Mexico and he found tortilla chips, and they were wonderful, and they were like fresh off out of the deep fat, and they were just corn chips, and they were hot and greasy, and he ate them, and wonderful. Do we sell anything like that? No. Now you eat a Dorito and it tastes like ranch dressing or jalapeno or chipotle. There's so many spices and flavorings that we have to put on everything before we're happy. And our palate has changed to the point where we've got to have that. Partially we've got to have that, and partially the plants and the animals have changed so they don't have the flavor that they used to have. So wild foods to modern foods and crop has changed some things. Living off the land to living for fast foods. And really the biggest villain, the biggest enemy of our metabolic fate as humans is the Western diet and our lifestyles where we sit around all the time. That's really the biggest enemies that we have. We need to be eating the good things. We have to have a diet with nutrients and phytoactives. We need to have exercise, and we need to have movements, and we just don't do enough of it in our lifestyle now. We have a project now that several of us at the Plants for Human Health Institute, which is the North Carolina state operation, started with funding from the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. And it's all about this problem that America has where we all know what we're supposed to eat and we don't do it. We know we're supposed to have a certain proportion of fruits and vegetables and grains and protein, and we just, even those of us with good intentions, we slip or we just don't follow it at all. So only 13% of the population, a lot of people say a lot less than that, consumes the 4.5 servings of fruits and vegetables we're supposed to do. So how do we close the gap? And this whole project is aimed at getting more bang for the buck in the fruits and vegetables that we do have. So breeding not so much for sweetness and color, but breeding instead for content, so high concentration of phytonutrients and phytoactive compounds, but also for bioavailability, because it doesn't matter what's on your plate, it matters what gets absorbed, okay? Like you can eat half a bottle of vitamin C and you're just going to have expensive urine because your body's only going to absorb so much. So we've got to have foods that we can absorb well. And so this whole approach is we're looking at breeding strategies, genomic strategies, to identify genetic markers that control bioavailability of micronutrients. Very little breeding in the United States, anywhere actually, very little breeding has actually been for health. Did you know that? Almost all breeding has been for disease resistance, insect resistance, yield. Almost all. Very little. Part of the reason people don't breed for health is because the demand hasn't been there. It's changing now. People are getting more savvy. People are starting to demand things that have active compounds in them. But very little, breeders have given very little attention to that. And part of the reason also is to be a breeder is it's a long-term, like somebody in my field, I work with phytoactive compounds, I can do some work and publish a paper the next year. Papers and grants are the currency of science. So in order to succeed, we have to write papers on our research and get grants. And I can do that, boom, boom, boom. But a breeder has to wait 5 years and look at 5 years of data and see, before he can really have something conclusive to say. So breeding is a long thing. And so it's very difficult for breeders to shift to health because it's been very hard for them to look at the markers that make a difference for health. So this whole project is looking to, make it easier to identify what factors genetically will help for bioavailability of phytoactive compounds. Genomics, metabolomics, and bioavailability. So we have been looking at polyphenols, and berries that I mentioned that's the key phytoactive compound in berries. And they've been linked to a number of different health outcomes. And so that's why they are so important in the diet. But they have a very interesting metabolism. So you eat berries, and we just have some blueberries and grapes up on top. And you eat them, and usually, you're thinking that they're going to go down into your stomach and be absorbed. But actually what happens is most of these berry compounds actually go to your colon. And only when they're in your colon do they start getting metabolized by the microbiome, so that all the bacteria that you have in your gut that live symbiotically with you, which we're only really just starting to appreciate, that this is how things are working. There's 10 times more bacteria in your gut than there are human cells in your body. So they've been all freeloading for a long time, but we couldn't live without them. So these polyphenols go down into the colon, and they get converted by the bacteria to simpler phenolic compounds, bioactive compounds. Then they go back up through the portal vein and are absorbed to the liver. And they come out with phase 2 conjugation to form these active compounds that only then get into the bloodstream. So it's really kind of a cool thing that the first real discovery on this was 2012, so it hasn't been so long ago, all right? That berries are not working, you eat them and then they go right into your bloodstream. Used to be like they'd give people in clinical trials a bunch of berries and take a drawing out of the blood. Couldn't see hardly any metabolites from those berries. They found out that, that's because they're going down to the colon, getting transformed into other things, and then phase 2 conjugation into even more, and then they're transporting through the body. So they're actually resident in your body way longer. Berry compounds are really, polyphenols in general, resident in your body much longer than what we thought originally. Okay, so they actually, this is a whole new area that is fascinating. The source of this is David Neiman, who's one of the professors on campus, who's been a wonderful collaborator. So, sorry.
I just wondered if you could say something about augmented with exercise.
I'm going to.
Oh.
Yeah, I definitely will. Because that is absolutely the case, and we'll get to that. So we're kind of getting to that now because phenolics are important. You can tell through your phenolic content in your urine. That's linked to lower mortality, so we know the phenolics in the diet have a huge effect, but exercise linked to what you eat is everything. We've done a couple clinical trials that have really brought this home just in the last 6 to 8 months, and some not even published yet, so it's really cool that these phytoactive compounds from berries come out when you exercise. Now, in your epithelial cells, the barrier between your gut and your bloodstream, the cells have tight junctions, and they can kind of open up, all right? You can have intestinal permeability. For some diseases, that's a very bad thing, like Crohn's disease or celiac disease or obesity. This intestinal permeability can be a very bad symptom. But this is also a symptom that's transient after exercise, okay? Opening up of the gut, and this is part of the mechanism by which these bioactive compounds from the colon are getting circulated and getting more available in our bloodstream. And it's kind of like this opening of the intestinal permeability. It's like everything else. It's like the bell curve. You have not enough and then too much, but there's the sweet spot when there's just enough that you can get these compounds through exercise more available in your blood. So what you eat becomes more available when you have movement. So think about eating berries, for example. They're not going to be absorbed direct through the stomach like parent compounds, but they're more going to be coming down from the colon, and you're going to get breakdown metabolites. One small thing that we've done recently is we have taken berry compounds. The names of them are anthocyanins and proanthocyanidins, all these colored compounds that you'll find in berries. And we've fused them, complexed them with edible proteins, healthy proteins, like rice protein or pea protein or soy protein. We've done that. And it makes like a colored flour. This is actually whey protein, okay? So it makes like a colored flour. And what it does is it takes advantage of the natural attraction between proteins and polyphenols. This is the principle of tanning leather. You know, they take an animal hide and they tan it. But we're applying it to food here. So there's natural attraction between medium polarity compounds, phytoactive compounds from berries, and proteins. Just natural attraction, a binding between them that's stable but can disassociate in your gut. So we've done that, and it makes these availability of some of these compounds that maybe are not so available otherwise. We found that this gives us a lot of health functionality because we're concentrating and stabilizing these polyphenols, but we're also getting a lot of structural functionality, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. It's actually helping the structure of the foods that we make out of it. Okay, so here we're dealing with, well, prebiotics, which are foods that selectively stimulate those bacteria in your guts, and you know all about those. And berries are a good prebiotic. They're excellent. You can eat berries and have health benefits, but because you're making your gut bacteria happy, and less inflammation in your gut bacteria, less oxidation in your gut that transmits to the rest of your body and improves health through that. You're making those bacteria healthy before you're making your human cells happy. Then probiotics is when you eat live microorganisms, and symbiotics are when you put the two together in a product like kombucha. So we did a study a while back where we were looking at black currants from New Zealand, and we were thinking, okay, how can we show how important the gut microbiota are to how well these compounds from those black currant berries are metabolized? So we took 6 different sets of mice, high-fat diet or a low-fat diet, fed them black currants in their diet, or fed them black currants plus antibiotics. What would antibiotics do? Kill the gut bacteria. So those animals that were eating black currants but antibiotics did not have the gut helping those berries to get into the gut. What we found is that absolutely the high-fat diet that had, high-fat diet body weight's higher than the high-fat diet when you eat currants, which is the red here, so lower weight. But if you took away the gut microbiota, that's the CA, the currants plus the antibiotic, just goes back up to, without the gut microbiota, the black currants, which are good for you and help with weight gain, are not doing their job. Now we get to humans. I particularly like this slide. I could stay here forever. But anyway, getting to humans. Did some work with David Neiman at Appalachian State. Both of us are co-located in the Plants for Human Health Institute, looking at physically active adults eating berry compounds and what that, what activity, what kind of effect activity had. So we took these humans, we fed them this, I mentioned this protein polyphenol powder before, because this is an easy way to give fruit to a clinical participant in a very stable format that's going to be the same for each clinical participant. And you think about let's say you wanted to have a clinical trial and have one group have berries and one group have a placebo. How are you going to make a placebo for the berry? Right, you can't. Make a powder out of the berry. Okay, it's easier to make a powder that looks and smells like that powder. And so that's what we did here. We made a protein polyphenol binding of the berry compounds, and then had a placebo that looked and smelled just like it and tasted like it as well, but all artificial. And we had these athletes, we gave 14 days supplementation with the berry compounds. And then at the end of the 14 days, they had 3 days of 2.5 hours on exercise bikes, killing themselves. It's called overreaching. So it's like to the point where you're not quite dead, but getting pretty close, you know? And it's amazing. I love working with athletes because, you know, if you do a clinical trial with maybe like overweight, middle-aged women, and you'll feed them berries, and then maybe they're going to go on vacation and forget to tell you, or, oh, I think I'm getting diarrhea, I'm not going to take them anymore, but I'm not going to tell you, or they're going to drop out, you know, all kinds of reasons. It doesn't really go anywhere. But athletes, if they think it's going to make them run better, be stronger, they're on board. And you can take an athlete and you can take a muscle biopsy out of their leg. Have you ever seen a muscle biopsy? Okay, it's like salmon roe on sushi, except a lot of it, and it's nasty. And then they bandage up the leg of these guys, and they put them back on the treadmill, and they run 2.5 hours, and then they do the other leg. And then the athlete says, and you're going to pay me as well? Wow. It's great. So anyway, they got these athletes to the point where they call it overreaching, and the striking effect when they took this supplement for the 14 days plus 3 days, they had a wonderful polyphenolic signature in their serum, but it was intensified when they exercised. In fact, it was strikingly intensified with exercise. And enhanced ketogenesis, that's fat burning. So they had fat burning. Everybody has better fat burning when they're exercising, but these athletes that had taken the polyphenol supplementation had fat burning even when they were in recovery and were done exercising, which is a pretty cool effect. But one of the worst things that athletes have to deal with is not so much running or, you know, being strong or swift, but the exhaustion and the immunocompromised status that they have after they've worked out really hard, especially people who run the marathon. Really common to get the flu the weekend after you do the marathon. It happens. It's well documented. And so we've taken blood from those athletes through that 17-day thing. We took blood in the beginning. We took blood before they began their exercise. We took blood at the end of the exercise. You know, so we took blood at all these different points. And we took their blood and we exposed HeLa cells, human cells, to the blood of these athletes, and then we challenged it with virus, okay? And what we found is that the athletes that had the polyphenolics in their blood, the viral, the ability of the virus to kill the human cells was greatly depressed, especially when those athletes had exercised. And we also did a virus replication, so the ability of the virus to replicate, the same kind of an assay. And we found that the athletes that had the berries in the blue here, the berries in their blood, greatly depressed viral replication. So you weren't getting virus to kill your cells, and you weren't getting virus to replicate as much when you had those polyphenols, those polyphenol metabolites from the colon running around in the athlete's bloodstream. So we showed through this test that athletes were indeed more vulnerable post-exercise. Their vulnerability went way high. But then using a polyphenol-rich supplement versus a placebo greatly improved their antiviral capacity. Oops. So how do we get people to eat the functional foods? That's the key thing, right? And I just told you all this stuff is dependent on functional foods, and people don't necessarily want to eat those functional foods. So we have done this polyphenol ingredient, you know, this kind of protein polyphenol ingredient, and tried to make it into products that are palatable, good for school lunches, that people are going to like. And we did this for the U.S. Army because they were interested in, you know, you got guys going out in the field in Afghanistan, you can't pack fruits and vegetables for them, right? So they were interested in getting fruit and vegetable nutrients and phytoactive compounds bound to protein in protein bars that they could give to the guys out in the field. Same thing with NASA. They were interested in getting compounds from berries that would be stable enough to make it for a 3-month mission to Mars. So that's specifically why we got that grant with them. So it's a very simple strategy for getting these things together. And we did some work on this where it not only helped the health benefits, but also helped the structural benefits of the food. Like NASA was interested in getting a protein bar that could make it 3 months to Mars. What happens when you buy a protein bar? Like you go to Walmart and they're on sale, so you buy a whole bunch of protein bars, like 3 months worth or 2 months worth. Nobody does that? They get hard, right? You break your teeth. You know, because protein in a bar, which is supposed to be nice and flexible, it's still active, even though it's packaged into that bar. And that protein will cross-link with itself and with sugars in the bar. And it'll keep cross-linking to the point where then it becomes very hard and brittle. And so they were interested. So we were looking at these protein polyphenol particles and using a rheometer to squish them down to see how non-brittle we could make them, all the way from elastic to the viscous state. And we found that creep recovery is the way that you measure it. And we had a bar that was just made with whey protein, and that's the big one that athletes always use, whey protein bars, like 20 grams in a bar. And how it got hard over a number of days in storage. But then when you make the bars with protein polyphenol particles, you know, like whey protein, but then it's got berry particles around it, the hardness is way, way down. But then interestingly, when you only needed 30% of the protein to be modified to keep the bars nice and flexible, because 30% of the proteins modified prevented the other proteins from cross-linking with each other. So pretty good. Okay. All right, so we were looking at this for association of the proteins and polyphenols. We looked at interaction conditions, and we wanted to modify it for all different kinds of applications, and that's what we're working on now. And one little plus is the effect of this protein polyphenol binding on allergy. Now you think about it. What gives you an allergy? You have a peanut protein, and the peanut protein has epitopes on it that interact with human therapeutic targets to induce IgE reaction, and you start getting histamine release and all the allergic reactions. There's epitopes on the protein. When you do protein polyphenol binding, it binds with those epitopes, changes the conformation of the epitope so the human body does not recognize it as an allergen. So that's been pretty cool. So we've been working on using that to reduce the allergenicity to peanut protein with cranberry. Okay, so and that works very, very well to take advantage of these medium polarity polyphenols to proteins. We did some work on this. There's a human trial going on now in cooperation with A&T University, but we did some work with pigs where we took the pigs, and the reason we like pigs, you can do these tests with mice, but pigs have the same kind of gastrointestinal system as humans, so it's easier to see allergic reactions. We made the pigs, in this case, allergic to eggs, and the pigs would get the same rashes as humans, they would vomit just like humans, and you could actually use these pigs to show diarrhea, all the same reactions, and inside their esophagus, they'd get these little projections, eosinophils, in the esophagus, the same kind of reaction that humans get. So it's kind of cool that this model was able to give us human reactions. And we were able to find with oral food challenges that with the protein polyphenol on the protein, the allergic reactions would go way, way down. Okay, and even eating the proteins, the peanut proteins, and you'd make the digestive proteins, even the digestive fragments were way, way less allergic. So just to finish up now, food is our medicine. That's what we're concerned about, is food is our medicine, applications with food that deliver health protective ingredients as well as bioavailability. I mentioned we did the work with the Army. It's really key to get it out to people. You could be the guys, you could be, it's not just for the Army, right? You could be backpackers that need stable food in their backpack, or you could be the guy in the backpack, or you could be campers or school lunches, a lot of these reasons where you need foods that are healthy but stable. And so that's kind of what our research is trying to go for. So trying to get it to that way. We've also been working a little bit in the third world with this. In developing countries, we worked a little bit with the Bill and Melinda Gates Project in Zambia. And Zambia is really interesting place because they have, it's like a jungle. It's tropical, beautiful wildlands, lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of mangoes. But for 6 months, they've got lots of fruits and vegetables. And then this is the rainy season. And then they have 6 months of the dry season. Still plenty warm, but it's dry. So fruits and vegetables, and they have no refrigeration, they have no way to preserve. So they don't have fruits and vegetables during the dry season. It's all dried up. They subsist on what they call nishima, which is cornmeal, which is like grits, but a really, really thick grits. And so we brought this technology to Zambia to take mango and bind it with protein, peanut protein or soy protein, and have them just mix it in the nishima so that they could have fruits and vegetables even in the dry season. Or just the natural public of today. Everybody needs it, right? Everybody can use it. So we're all looking for opportunities in the American public. So everybody, eat for your health. And the key thing is, it's important, you are what you eat, and you really have to move to get the benefits of it. So thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions. Please. So Huckleberry, she was asking what state was this? Oh, okay, yeah. So when I said, she was asking where do wild blueberries grow, and she went out and collected wild blueberries in North Carolina called huckleberries. Yes, that is the same genus. It's still genus Vaccinium. It's not the particular genus species that's the wild blueberry barons, but it's definitely has those same properties. Fantastic. Which research?
When you were doing the last group with the athletes and what they were eating?
We've done both. We've done both. Yes, basically it's quantity. You have to eat twice as much cultivated blueberries to get phytoactive compounds that you'd get in like a half a cup of wild blueberries. Still has good things. It's just not as intense, not as diverse of a profile chemically. So you get more bang for your buck with wild, but cultivated still good. Oh, Walmart, Costco. Yes, absolutely. Frozen section. Frozen. Not the ones in the clamshell. No, they do not ship here. You can't get fresh wild blueberries unless you're in Maine or Canada. Frozen, all frozen. And they individually quick freeze them, which means they go down the assembly line, like right after they're picked, and they get blasted, and they quick frozen. So every bit of the beautiful bioactivity that's in a fresh berry is captured in that wild blueberry. Then they have them in bags, and they'll pour out nice single berries. They don't all freeze together like you've ever bought frozen strawberries and you have to hack them with a sledgehammer. No, they're all separated, and they're beautiful. So I've never been a huge organic advocate. However, if you go to the wild, organic is as close as you can get to wild cultivation because it's minimal inputs. It's allowing the plant to be stressed a little bit, so it is able to build up more phytoactive compounds. That being said, there have not been really good studies to really conclusively show the difference. Logically in my head, I think organic, having some stress, they're going to be better, but they haven't been side-by-side comparisons, not good ones that have been published yet. It's something that should be done. Please.
Elderberry prepared.
Elderberry's great. I've done a lot of work on elderberry. It is also part of Native American folklore for colds and flu. It has a different anthocyanin profile. She's still going at him, isn't she? She's in a loop. Actually, if we had the volume, she's making these cute little sounds. They don't have as so wild blueberries have 28 different anthocyanins. You know, if you did a HPLC profile, you'd see quite great diversity. Elderberry, it's narrower but still intense. So good stuff. Please. Not yet. Well, let me take that back. So a company in North Carolina, bless their hearts, called Glean, like in the Bible when you went out and gleaned the field after it had been harvested. It's a company in North Carolina called Glean that believes in sustainability and reusing things, reusing food that can't be otherwise used, like sweet potatoes that have a bad spot on them, so they'll cut that out and use it. And they have made protein polyphenol gummies, made of sweet potato, beets, blueberries, of course. They can't work with me without blueberries. And they're wonderful. They taste so good. And they just went on the market last week. Yeah. There are a lot of other companies that are in various stages of things. Coca-Cola is one of them, but Glean is the one that's out there now. Glean. On Amazon. Yeah. And you can like them on Facebook and you'll find out. They sell like flour made out of sweet potatoes or flour made out of pumpkins or squash. And I don't know exactly what it is, but every pound that you buy, they donate a pound to charity. So, I mean, they're really a public good company. Please. Capsules. So most of the time, like Carol said, I believe in eating the food, but freeze drying is the way to preserve the good stuff in berries. But I will say that a lot of those pills that you buy at GNC or Walgreens, you know, cranberry pills, blueberry pills, no. They've been spray dried, they've lost all the activity, they're worthless. They're just worthless. But they still sell them because there's very little regulation that goes into them. So you really got to watch yourself. Freeze-dried is always good, though. Anybody else?
I don't know if you said this, but I was curious about the stimulation of the immune system. Whatever the blueberries are carrying with them, you know, into your blood.
Mm-hmm. So it is those phytoactive compounds that are in circulation from the berries. And we've named them all. We have a whole list of them, but they actually, in circulation, are stimulating the immune system so that, at least for virus, it didn't work so well for bacteria, but for virus, you have much less susceptibility. I'll get you the paper on that if you'd like. Okay? Please. Wild or cultivated? A cup, which isn't hard. You know, people think, oh, a cup of blueberries. You know, you can just, my daily routine is I get up, I get them out of the freezer, put them in the bottom of a bowl. I zap them in the microwave just for a couple of seconds, because just to get the frost off of them. Now, let me just, since I just mentioned that, the worst thing you can do is over microwave berries. People do this all the time. They'll get some really healthy frozen produce, any produce, broccoli, berries, anything, and you zap them in the microwave too long, and they still look green or blue or whatever, and they still taste okay, but you absolutely killed everything. So really minimize microwave. But what I do is I put them in the bowl, zap them just enough to get the frost off, pour the hot oatmeal over them, and that's how I have my blueberries. You can have them with meat. You can have them on top of your salad. There's so many ways, smoothies. There's so many ways to have them that, I just think it's easy. Yeah, they're good. Just ask her. Okay, anybody else? Please.
Are the old, hard protein bars, are they still good?
Yeah, they're still good. It's just really not palatable. Yeah, the protein's really shelf stable, so they're fine. But I mean, how can you? And you can microwave a protein bar and make them softer. So that's one place that I would recommend a microwave. Okay, thank you very much.